Welcome back to Grace to Endure. In this short video, we're going to look at Jesus' example of how to handle being betrayed to the death. In other words, for the purpose of having you put to death and the betrayal coming from your close companions. Let's look at Jesus' example of how to handle betrayal. So we see in these passages I have at the top right, throughout all the Gospels, we see these descriptions of how Jesus handled being betrayed by Judas, left by all the disciples, left alone, and denied by Peter. And this is very deeply personal. These are all his closest companions on earth, and that was their reaction. So let's read in Matthew 26:20 and 21 and see Jesus' state of mind. When evening came, he was reclining at the table with the 12. While they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." And we can see as we read all the different passages that Jesus was calm. He was not fighting. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't in Judas's face. He doesn't even seem angry. So let's look on the left side and I think that these are pretty obvious, things that we can observe as we read all of these passages as to how Jesus' state of mind was at the time of being betrayed for the point of putting him to death. Number one, he knew ahead of time. I think this brought him comfort and was very helpful. This is going to happen for us in the future too. We're going to get that in the next slide. I'll explain that even more. He was willing to let it happen. He had accepted that this was the plan of God, and he had accepted it. Those two are very important. Number one, the comfort of knowing ahead of time and knowing God's in control. This is part of his plan. Number two, accepting God's plan. Now, I think that's what's going to enable us, because it enabled him to be able to keep with the plan. Now, the plan for Jesus is different than the plan for us slightly, and I'll get into that once again in the next slide. But right here, I want to point out that Jesus, he went to the same place, the same garden that Jesus and the disciples always went to. This is the place where Judas would be familiar with and would know to find Jesus. Jesus knows this is the place where Judas is going to look for him, and he still goes there. So he keeps with the plan because this is what God wanted him to do. So he didn't stray from it. Okay, let's keep going. Jesus was troubled in spirit. We actually see that in John chapter 13, verse 21. I'm going to read it. When Jesus had said this, he was troubled in his spirit and testified, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." So this was very troubling to him, but yet he remained calm. So how did he not panic? Well, we can see he actually prayed a lot. So in the context of all of this, we see Jesus praying for himself, praying for his disciples, and even praying for the future disciples that hadn't even been born yet. And he's submitting to God's will. So this is the mindset we will have to have if we're going to be copying Jesus' example of how to handle betrayal from a person that we love. Okay, so how do you not panic? Well, you pray, you submit and accept what God is going to do with you and how he's going to use your life and your death. Okay, and how do you remain calm before, during, and after? You need to be thinking about the other people. You need to be thinking about those that are watching you as an example. Be thinking about people that could become disciples, your witness and your testimony, and be thinking about even future disciples that might hear your story. This is important, and I think it helps us to not panic. On the screen, I have Luke 21:16 and 17. I'm going to read a little bit more of the passage to you now. I'm going to pick up in the middle of verse 12. They will hand you over to synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors because of my name. This will give you an opportunity to bear witness. Therefore, make up your minds not to prepare your defense ahead of time, for I will give you such words and a wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict. You will even be betrayed by parents, brothers, relatives, and friends. They will kill some of you. You will be hated by everyone because of my name, but not a hair on your head will be lost. By your endurance, gain your lives. Okay, when it says not a hair on our head will be lost, that doesn't mean that none of us are going to die the first death. It means we're not going to die the second death. Okay, we know it says right here that they're going to kill some of us. We know a lot of us are going to be killed. The scriptures say that. So during this time of great persecution, which will be here for the great tribulation, many of us are going to be betrayed, and it's going to be very personal. Even members of our own household, even people from our own church that we sat in the pews next to them and we thought they were believers. Okay, this is going to be extremely personal, just like it was for Jesus. Let's look on the left side of the screen and just jot down a few points to remember that will hopefully help us get the right mindset that Jesus had. And some of the things that are added are things that are specifically commanded to us here in Luke 21. Okay, so number one, we know ahead of time, just like Jesus did. And it was a comfort to him to know that he was doing exactly what God the Father wanted him to do. And it should comfort us that this is part of God's plan, and he is going to use us to do what he is wanting to do. And it is a great thing. Next point, be willing to let it happen. We need to accept and trust God's plan. So this is just a matter of submission and trust. Like, God is doing this. He's in control, and I'm going to trust him. Next point, we need to trust him with the words to say. And this is one that's added here in this text, specifically to those that go through the tribulation. God's going to give them words to say that no one will even be able to contradict, but that means they're going to have to be bold and speak it. They're going to have to say what the Holy Spirit is showing them to say at that time. So if you find yourself in front of a governor, a ruler, or some famous people, you need to realize that the Holy Spirit's going to help you, and then you need to be bold to say what he's telling you to say. So then the next point I have here is keep with the plan. We need to view this as an opportunity to give the gospel. So we need to think ahead of time. This is very likely going to happen to me. When it happens to me, I need to see this as an opportunity, not a time to fight. Okay? Then replace panic with prayer. So Jesus did this. We saw that in the previous slide. So we need to do this as well. We need to pray for ourselves so that we will glorify God. Number two, we need to pray for those that are the believers that are going through the same thing and the ones that aren't going through the same thing that we're going through. We need to pray for fellow believers that we know. And then lastly, we need to be praying for future believers, people that might get saved. And remember, they might actually get saved because of our very testimony of what we're doing right then. And then lastly, the last point I really want to bring up is remember how we saw that Jesus was not getting angry. He did not revile. He didn't speak evil of and try to get these people back as they were doing this. No, he didn't hate. He didn't fight. We need to do the same thing. That should not be our mindset, is fighting and getting our rights and all of that. It's time to lay all that down. If we are called by God to do this very important task, we need to see it as an opportunity to get the gospel out to many more people.